We're ready for the start. They're off.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome to the It's Official podcast. Jeremy Plonk and Jeff Siegel from First Bet. If you knew how many times it just took me to get through that far in the show without breaking it, you'd know we're on to something right now. A little behind the scenes, and thank God for editing. Jeff, we're going to have a good show here now that we're off and rolling. And boy, what 5 topics do we have this week, including a Triple Crown tracker that could be a whole show in its own right. We had a lot of action last week on the 3-year-old trail.
We did. Critical preps, as we will always have this time of the year. Various locations, Santa Anita, of course, and we had Keeneland and New York. And we have some question marks still remaining. Usually by now, we've kind of come to a conclusion, at least in terms of who we're going to like. But, man, it's just more tough than ever. And now we got a month to watch workouts, and maybe that'll tip the scale one way or the other. But right now, there are at least a half a dozen or more that could claim a legitimate chance to win the Derby. It's kind of a fun year, and we'll try to make some sense of it, at least from the last week's weekend racing on the show.
And the way it's gone, chances are the horses we didn't like that much will be the ones that'll work great. Now we'll have to choose between 14 of them by the time we get to Derby Day. Triple Crown Tracker does kick off the big board this week, and we've got it times 3, if you will, with the Santa Anita Derby, the Bluegrass, and the Wood in the books. We're going to give you a chance to look at the replays of those races, and Jeff and I will give our analysis on what we thought. Let's start first off at Santa Anita in Jeff's backyard. Practical Move is expected to do it pretty easily on the tote board, especially with the scratch and go rocket ride, but turned out to be a thriller.
Less than a half mile to go in the Run Happy Santa Anita Derby. And One in Vermilion has been there throughout. Practical Move has room at the rail, moving closer effortlessly. And here's Practical Move within ahead of the front runner. On the outside, there goes Skinner, and Skinner's making a bold early move with a quarter of a mile to go. National Treasure is just behind him. And now it's Practical Move squaring off with Skinner on the outside. Mandarin Hero running a valiant race. He's moving right into contention, splitting rivals with an 1/8 of a mile to go. Practical Move a length. Mandarin Hero grinding away at him. And Skinner on the outside. Practical Move. Here's Mandarin Hero surging. Practical Move, Mandarin Hero. Practical Move has won the Run Happy Santa Anita Derby by a nose over Mandarin Hero. Skinner was a close third.
I thought he was going to have to throw in a wins it for America a la Tom Durkin there, because the Japanese are winning everything, and Mandarin Hero almost got there, Jeff. And from the B leagues in Japan, Mandarin Hero putting a threat into one of our top charges this year, Practical Move. What do we make of this year's Santa Anita Derby?
You know, this is a tough race for me to grasp. I still haven't grasped it. I want your input because I need somebody to make clarity of this race. There was the 100 buyer number is very solid. Nothing wrong with that. Mandarin Hero, I had no idea, what to expect from him.
Right.
And he certainly ran terrific under the circumstances. He was kind of intimidated between horses and didn't get a clear run. Stayed on very gamely, got beat a nose. The thing that bothered me about this race, Jeremy, was despite the fact that the buyer number was legit, National Treasure finished 4th in this race, and he was absolutely dead at the quarter pole, as was One in Vermilion. And then look up in the last 50 yards, and they're right in the picture. So I'm wondering, was anybody finishing in this race at all? The final 8th was almost 13 seconds. And I don't know. I'm Practical Move won. I'm glad that he won. I expected him to win. He was one of my top picks. But I don't know whether he got any better than he had, and maybe he slipped a little bit. So I'm still really troubled by this race. I really am, and I'd like for you to maybe steer me in the right direction.
Well, the race looked just like the San Felipe, didn't it? Right? He comes through on the inside. I think it was the Baffert horse, Ajazi, who kind of blew the turn a little bit. And then this one was One in Vermilion. The rail opens right up, and you expected him just to blow away at that point. And had this race been a mile and a 16th like the San Felipe, I think it might have happened that way. He got a length and a half, 2 lengths clear, and then the other horses crept up on him. I think that last 16th of a mile started to creep up on him, and the field came back. One in Vermilion got beat 4.5 lengths. I mean,
right.
What? I mean, what?
Right.
I mean, that's not supposed to happen. And the way the race was shaping up, in the same way, National Treasure looked like they were in the bike and they were riding. It was done,
Right.
And that horse got beat 2 3/4 for all the money. So, yes, it was a fast final time. I mean, like, the clock kind of fools me here because they come home in 37:44. That's a great final 3 furlongs for a mile and an eighth for these horses, And in this crop, that's going to stack up as well as any final 3 furlongs. But I refuse to believe that One in Vermilion ran that fast. I refuse to believe that National Treasure ran that fast. Even if the clock tells me, my lion eyes say no. So this race clumped at the end. It looked like it went to a mile and a 16th, and then it all just kind of squeezed together. And now they got to go another eighth of a mile, another 220 yards in the Kentucky Derby. That's of concern to me for Practical Move, the way that he ran in this race. I don't think he had any major regression. I just think he might be best at a mile and a 16th. The mile and an eighth was capable of him winning against a solid field here. Not a great field, but a solid field.
Right.
But I don't know that he beats the best of the crop going another 220 yards after seeing that. He went from like a clear number 2 in my eyes to he looks a lot like everybody else. I mean, he's gelled in there where 6 or 7 look to be as good as him going a mile and a quarter. You might still like him, but if you used to like him at 6-1, 5-1 as the second, third choice in the Kentucky Derby, you better get 8 or 10 now. I mean, that performance to me makes you bump up another point or two. And the suspicion I get with him is we've got all these closers in the Kentucky Derby, right? All these plotting type horses. None of them are going to work in 57. Right. They're all going to be horses that work a minute 101. There may be a couple of horses, but the main contenders are all horses who are not going to wow everybody Derby week and get all the buzz. This horse will probably work fast. He's a fast worker. He's looked really good in the mornings working. He's probably likely to get more workout buzz than a lot of the other horses, just because of his natural speed. And that might work against getting that inflated price that you might deserve. So I'm price sensitive on him. I still think he's a very good horse. He's a grade 1 winner. Look, not many horses sweep the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby. I think, going back and looking at it, and the ones who have run very, very well in the Kentucky Derby. You're talking about the Pioneer of the Niles in recent years, not many of them. And all the horses who have run well and swept California Chrome, won the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby. They've all run very well in Louisville. Dortmund was the other one. That was the 3 I was trying to think of. Since 2009, Pioneer of the Nile, Dortmund, and California Chrome are the only horses to win the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby. All 3 ran top 3 in the Kentucky Derby. So in that case, if you're good enough to win those 2 races, it doesn't happen very often, and you're good enough to compete in the Kentucky Derby. I still think he's one of the top horses, but again, like that 2 through 6, 2 through 7 looks a lot closer than it did a couple weeks ago. And just like number 1, I mean, Forte was the same way, right? Forte is still number 1, but he's not up here and everybody else down here after the Florida Derby. So they've all come together, which, like you talked about right off the top, makes it a very interesting Derby. But I do think the mile and an eighth had something to do here. I don't think he was quite as sharp as he was in the San Felipe in a mile and a 16th as he was at the mile and an eighth here. Not to say that he can't get distance. Somebody's going to get the mile and a quarter on the first Saturday of May faster than everybody else, right? I mean, that's the way that it is.
Yeah. And a couple other things. I thought Skinner pulled a mage. I thought he moved too soon. I would have liked to have him waited to the top of the stretch as opposed to being put into a drive at the 3/8 pole, because when you do that, you're trying to circle the pack and go by horses who are still pretty fresh. They're not going to wave the white flag, but if you catch them when they're starting to get a little tired, not only do you demoralize them, but your own horse starts to feel like I'm going somewhere, And I thought maybe he loomed and hung. I wish he could have waited a little longer. So I still think Skinner has got a legitimate chance, even though there's going to be a little pace on the race. Mandarin Hero really blew me away. I know that his the rider Kimura had breezed him the other day, prior to the race. I think he went a half in 53 or something, and he had told some people, "I'm not that impressed," but he ran. He really did. And we look at him and we try to compare him to the other Japanese main horse, Durma Soragaki, and I think most people would concede that the other one is better, and yet this horse comes with a nose of beating Practical Joke, who by all rights was the worst second pick in the Derby, makes the other horse look better. So you're trying to, compare sometimes apples to oranges and final times and ratings and stuff and speed figures.
Yeah.
And Practical Move's number holds up, but visually, I'm with you. I'm not now convinced he really wants to go 1.25 miles. He'll have that same punch he is by Practical Joke, who was basically a one-turn horse anyway. So I left with some more question marks than I wanted to have. I'm just going to have to figure it out in the next month where I want to place this race and these horses and how they fit in the national in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and with the Skinner, the untimed move, sometimes jockeys and horses are just really good fits. I've always felt that Victor Espinosa was a really good front end rider and a good stalker. You're like, sit second, third, really timing the pace that way. I never looked at him as Eddie De La Houssaye or Joel Rosario from far off the pace. It's not necessarily his forte. Maybe he doesn't fit this horse particularly great, but at least to have a move like that, he learned something from this race now that, okay, I can't do that with him, right? Because he's not going to come through. That he learned that, because I'm sure he'll have the mount back in the Kentucky Derby. He's a multiple winner of the Kentucky Derby. So you wanted him in a race like the Kentucky Derby. You love having Victor Espinosa, but I don't know that his style fits this horse particularly perfect. But, he's had a lap under him in a race like this where he really got that acceleration and move out of him. And we know he's capable of it. Now they just got to time it up right. They got it timed up right in the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland as Tapit Trice had a target to go after in Verifying. And he got there, but not by the way the tote board thought he would again.
Clear the air, leads at 3/4 of a length. Here's Verifying in second. Tapit Trice going to be wide to the far turn. Major Blue between horses third, 2 lengths off the lead. Classic Car Wash is in fourth. Blazing Sevens has to go to the center of the track in fifth and is still running 5 lengths from the front. Race Kane has nearly 10 lengths to make up. So does Scooby Quando. Verifying the leader. Top of the stretch. Tapit Trice is coming on to the outside. Clear the air, drops back. Blazing Sevens is fourth. Mendelssohn's March is fifth. Verifying Tapit Trice going at it for the lead. 1/8 of a mile to go. Toyota Bluegrass. Verifying is right there to the inside. Tapit Trice is right alongside. Past the 16th pole. Tapit Trice puts ahead in front. Tapit Trice wins the Toyota Bluegrass in the colors of the Whisper Hill Farm and partner Gainesway Stable, trained by Todd Pletcher, ridden by Luis Saez, 1 minute 50 seconds flat.
So mission accomplished for Tapit Trice, who was able to stay closer and in the right zip code from that rail draw and his poor braking in the past. There was concern he would just fall helplessly out of it, Jeff. He did break 8 lengths behind going after the first 1/4 mile, according to the chart, but he quickly evaporated that margin, and he was only about 3-4 lengths off the lead the rest of the way as they turned onto the backstretch. That's a much more approachable approach to winning the Kentucky Derby for him. What say you?
No, I agree. I thought Saez rode beautifully. He actually asked his horse hard out of the gate, knowing that if he kind of took a hold, he'd drop out of it. So he put him in mid-pack, and he was kind of lucky in this sense because it looked like he might get buried on the rail into the clubhouse turn, but there was nobody to the outside, so he kind of angled out. Even though he was losing ground, at least he was in the clear, and he actually had a great trip. Even though he lost some ground, I think Tapit Trice is the kind of horse that would rather be out there anyway. And he actually got a great trip from the 6.5 to the wire. And I think the track was kind to the outside lanes anyway. So I'll give credit to Saez and Tapit Trice. Verifying had a gorgeous trip. You couldn't get a better trip than he got. Yeah. Stalking the pace, went off the rail on a very moderate pace. And as expected, given that kind of trip, fought back bravely and proved hard to down. The number was a 99 buyer number. Okay, 1 point less than the Santa Anita Derby, so you can't knock it. And Tapit Trice does strike me as a horse who probably has another forward move in him, especially at 1.25 miles. And I also think Saez learned how to ride him this time. You better come out riding, because if you don't, instead of being mid-pack or even the second third of the pack, you'll probably end up last. You better ask him. But the good news is he asked him hard, and it didn't really affect his closing punch. He's just kind of a one-pace grinding horse with a long run in. And I think at 1.25 miles, I'd love for him to get an outside draw. I think he's got a chance to step forward. Another horse that I want to watch work, but I warn anybody who does watch him work, He's a good workhorse. He's going to look good. Trust me. He's going to look good.
Right.
So I think the first two horses were well clear of the others. I'm not sure there was much behind the first two. But I'm going to give Tapit Trice. I think he elevated himself a little bit for me, Jeremy, because he did what he had to do, and he got to a spot on the track where he could actually manufacture a win.
Yeah, if you thought there was a little slippage to his game after the Tampa Bay Derby, I think he eradicated that. I think it shows he's got another step forward, He's got to do it again now, like they all do. Nobody's going to run their B game and win the Kentucky Derby. So somebody's got to still step forward and do it. Now, the interesting thing is that there's 6 lengths between first and second and all the way back to third place finisher in here, Blazing Sevens, who, for his no-show in Florida earlier this year, he did make amends a little bit, but he was no threat to these at all. He did gallop out fairly well, so if you're in the Blazing Sevens camp, you feel better if they move forward with him onto the Kentucky Derby. He has the qualifying points to do so. We'll show the points leaderboard after the Wood Memorial. The other thing about this race, though, Jeff, is the come-home time. Final 3 furlongs was 1/100th of a second faster than the Santa Anita Derby. They ran essentially the same final 3 furlongs.
Yes.
Yet the Santa Anita Derby looked like this clump pack at the end, and they were coming back. And this one, these two drew off from the rest of the field. It's just interesting dynamics. So maybe the third and fourth, second and third horses, maybe this horse in the Santa Anita Derby are better than the back end of this race. I mean, maybe that's what we're to say, that National Treasure and One in Vermilion would have run a lot better in the Bluegrass had they been matched up with those horses.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's funny. On the clock, they look identical. And like you said, the buyer numbers are a point off for the winners. So on all the time scales, this race looks a lot like the Santa Anita Derby.
Well, I will say this. The buyer numbers, of course, or whatever speed figure system you use, does assign a track variant to put it all in line. I can tell you the Santa Anita main track on Saturday was very, very fast. Now, they had one other 1 1/8 race for older horses, and I think they were keying, the number was keyed off that race because it was slower. But I don't think those horses that ran that 1 1/8 race, even though they were decent older horses, were that great. So I think the track really was fast at Santa Anita. And I wonder whether the buyer number of 100 is something that you can hang your hat on. I'm not sure. It's just not an event. I know the sprint races were really, really fast. So probably almost certainly, I'm sure that the Santa Anita track was much faster than the Keeneland track. So if you're talking about final 3/8, I think your eyes will tell you that maybe Tapit and Verifying came home faster. And I think based on the variant, I think you can live with that.
Yeah, I mean, I just had my eyes checked this morning. Yeah. They're dilated. I'm squinting. So if you see me squinting, you know that I've had a bunch of procedures on my eyes today or whatever like that. But my eyes tell me that Bluegrass race looked better than the Santa Anita race. I just get the feeling that that's what it was. Now, my eyes tell me I can't believe what happened in the Wood Memorial because we liked the Tampa Bay Derby performance from Tapit Trice, but the 6th place finisher in that race was a horse named Lord Miles, who nobody gave much of a shot to in the Wood Memorial. 59-1 sent off, and it was bombs away in Ozone Park. Let's go back to the replay of the Wood.
There's a group of 4 up front, and Dreamlike is about to take command. It's Dreamlike who's ready to challenge a very game Arctic Arrogance, who's gutting it out towards the inside. Arctic Arrogance is there. Dreamlike, Hit Show is up on the outside, and Lord Miles, a huge number, is trying to pull off a shocker. 4 across the racetrack in the Wood. Hit Show is now put a nose in front. Dreamlike is still there. Lord Miles up on the outside. They're coming down to the finish. Hit Show, Lord Miles, Hit Show, Lord Miles, Lord Miles! Lord Miles at a huge number. Then came Hit Show and Dreamlike. Running time, 1 minute 51.17. A huge shocker. Lord Miles and Paco Lopez in the Wood Memorial.
So Lord Miles stuns everybody. Saffie Joseph Jr. back to the Kentucky Derby. He's done great things at Gulfstream Park on the road. We always say Saffie's not as good on the road as he is at home. He gets the big one at Aqueduct here, and Lord Miles now punches a ticket that we talked about bid stealers, like as far as the NCAA tournament goes. Right. Like when one of those mid-major conferences, the team that's 30-2 in the regular season gets beat in the conference finals, and now it's a 2-bid league because some, 17-12 team won the conference tournament. Well, Lord Miles just won some mid-major conference tournament and knocked off and took a bid from somebody probably here because Lord Miles and Hit Show are both going to have the points to play in the Kentucky Derby. Let's talk about the winner first, Jeff. I mean, this was one of the most improbable results, certainly of this season, but it goes up there with the Rockamundo winning the Arkansas Derby at 100 plus to 1. I mean, this is one of the highest upsets we've seen in the final Derby prep ever.
Well, the only thing I can say in his defense is he's by Curlin, so he's eligible to get better with distance and maturity and all that. Having said that, if you looked at his speed figures going into that race, he'd never gotten a 90 Beyer speed figure. He never got an 80. He was in the 70s, which out here makes you worth about 50 in the claiming ranks, for 3-year-olds this time of the year. But he got there first. I was not expecting a whole lot from this race, other than I felt that Hit Show had an opportunity to separate himself from this group if he was going to be a real Kentucky Derby type of contender. I wasn't sure because he had never beaten anybody, but I thought even with the outside draw, this is the kind of field he's supposed to beat. And he didn't get it done. I mean, he didn't run badly. He got beat a nose. I mean, you can't critique him too much, and his Beyer number did raise a little bit, but even with the outside draw, he got over relatively well. He was outside, but he was in the clear. He wasn't losing all that much ground. And he just, like a lot of these horses in New York, especially at Aqueduct with that deep track, there's not a lot of acceleration there. They're like running in quicksand, and they're just kind of plodding, working hard. And yet they came home in 38-1, which is not that much slower than some of the other races. So again, another race that I don't really have a whole lot to take away from, other than my disappointment that Hit Show couldn't have won this race, even though he almost did. And I'm not sure whether there's going to be room on my ticket for any horse coming out of the Wood Memorial. I don't know. Maybe you have a different opinion, but that's how I stand right now.
Yeah, as of right now, look, 4 across the track coming down the lane. The outside horse typically in those races will kind of find a way to get it done. The horses in between are kind of working, claustrophobic and everything. And so Hit Show had that disadvantage of really being tight in between horses down the stretch, but you just want class to prevail at that point. Off a horse that ran 6th in Tampa Bay Derby, had never done anything at all in a stakes race, never run particularly fast. I don't care if you like speed figures or not. There was nothing on the form that tells you if Hit Show is a Kentucky legitimate contender, that he doesn't just find a way to win that race on class by 3/4 of a length, much less lose by a nose. So disappointing performance in that regard with him. For sure. Let's look at the impact of these 3 stakes races over the weekend at Santa Anita, the Bluegrass, and the Wood Memorial. These are where the horses rank on the Kentucky Derby qualifying point system, not their number of points, but where they rank. So Practical Move is number 2 in points. He's safely in the field from the Santa Anita Derby. Skinner's at 21, which means he's the first horse on the also eligible list if the Derby were drawn today. Mandarin Hero's at 24. So the 2-3 finishers in the Santa Anita Derby do not have enough points to play right now at this point. The Bluegrass, everything worked out perfectly for the Bluegrass in terms of who got points and what they had going into this race, that this race now has 5 of the top 17 points qualifiers, unbelievably, in the Kentucky Derby qualifying. Tapit Trice is 4th race. Kane is in their 9th. He was up the track running 6th, I believe, in the Bluegrass Stakes. Verifying's at 13. Sun Thunder, Blazing Sevens, with their previous points and what they earned on Saturday, are safely in the Kentucky Derby field amongst the top 17. As for the Wood Memorial, that bid stealer, as we talked about, Lord Miles, now ranks 6th with a 100-point win. Hit Show drops to 11th in the standings. Arctic Arrogance, Dreamlight on the board there, but they are looking for a lot of help to get in the Kentucky Derby field, ranked 27th and 31st. If you're watching the bubble right now, the last horse in the Derby field with 45 points is Jace's Road at number 19. He's got an earnings tiebreaker with several other horses like Skinner and Mandarin Hero are in the same point zone, I believe. I think Skinner's right at the 45 with him tied, but he has more earnings. So he has the tiebreaker in earnings to get into the field at this point. Of course, it's going to change. I think if you're Skinner or Mandarin Hero, you still have a reasonably good chance to get into the race, Jeff. And we have another race coming up this weekend, too, before we leave the Triple Crown Tracker, because there are points on the line, 20 to the winner, 8 to second down the line. In the Lexington Stakes, where Confidence Game is going to run in there for Keith DeSormo. He's safely in the Kentucky Derby field already. He won in at Fairgrounds or at Oaklawn in the Rebel.
Rebel.
Yeah, and so he's getting a prep here right before. We've seen Keith DeSormo do this before with a couple of his Kentucky Derby starters, so he's not afraid to do it on the short turnaround. The other horse of interest who has entered the Lexington Stakes or will enter the Lexington Stakes tomorrow is Disarm. He was the runner-up in the Louisiana Derby. This is one that we're on the outside looking in, and we need points to get in. You know, Confidence Game needs a race in him because he hasn't run since the Rebel, but Disarm needs the points, and they're going to try to get in Saturday's Lexington. So still a chance for one or two more horses to work their way into the Kentucky Derby field. Probably one more. Disarm could move himself up into the mix with a win on Saturday. Confidence Game, he's already in on points, and he's just looking to tune up. So interesting group coming up Saturday in the Lexington Stakes. And after that, we'll know maybe where the Derby field lies, barring any injuries.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at the 20 that you expect to run, and very little early speed signed on. Go Rocket Ride, who would have been a speed horse had he'd run last Saturday at Santa Anita, and assuming that he would have at least got enough points to get in and maybe even win that race. He was a speed horse. He's got no chance to go now, no points. So to me, the more I look at it a month out, and we've got still a ways to go, even though there will be no racing. I mean, Dermot Sotogake, I mean, he looks pretty salty to me at this stage. And I like the fact that he's already at Churchill Downs. He doesn't have to ship in. I mean, even if he goes south a little bit after a week or two there, he's got a chance to build himself back up. Yeah, I don't see any reason why he won't. And there's one horse I'm going to be watching working out because he may be the best horse anyway. And the way the race shape looks, he's going to have every chance. And then the way the Japanese horses are running and the way Mandarin Hero run, I'm sold. I wasn't a believer, but I am now for sure. That's where the strength may lie in the Derby this year.
And the way the pace goes, right? He went right to the front of the UAE Derby, and there may not be any pace for this year's Kentucky Derby. We will find out in due time. Speaking of time, I said we could have done the entire show on segment 1. We pretty much did, looking at the clock. So stick around for a little extended play version. This is like in the old days, you'd flip the record at this point, Jeff. We're going to the B side for the rest of today's show, but hope you stick around with us, fans, because we've got plenty more to go. Let's just get to topic 2 right now here on the big board. And Faiza was unfazed over the weekend in the Santa Anita Oaks, but all that does is cloud the Kentucky Oaks forecast. Let's go back and take a look at her big win at Santa Anita last weekend.
Faiza takes the lead with a quarter of a mile to go, and Tell Me No Lies is next, followed by Venganza. Window Shopping putting in a valiant effort with a furlong left to go, and it's Faiza with a 3-length lead. Clearly Unhinged and Tell Me No Lies, Window Shopping, all left in the wake of the fabulous Faiza, who's 5 for 5 and wins the Santa Anita Oaks with plenty in the tank.
So, Jeff, there's no question who the best filly in the West is in the 3-year-old filly ranks, but she's not going to the Kentucky Oaks. The whole Bob Baffert, Churchill Downs thing, she's not nominated to the Oaks. So if we've got clarity on the West Coast, it really doesn't matter for the Kentucky Oaks picture. But your thoughts on Faiza?
Faiza earned an 89 buyer number in this victory. That's the identical number that Wet Paint earned when she won the Fantasy. So it would have been a really interesting East versus West confrontation in Kentucky for the Oaks. It's not going to happen. Faiza obviously not eligible, so and not nominated for that reason. So talking to Baffert, I think there's a reasonable chance that you might see her in New York for one of those big New York races for 3-year-olds. There are so many of them. You got the Acorn, the Mother Goose, the CCA Oaks, Alabama, those kind of races. So I think that's what they're looking at. In due time, maybe she will hook up with Wet Paint, who looks like this. I don't know if she's a standout, but she's close to it, I think, Jeremy, 4 weeks out from the Kentucky Oaks. But Faiza was impressive. She's getting better with every race. Her numbers continue to rise. She's getting stronger. And obviously looks like a filly who will have no problem going longer after winning this race by more than 6 and kind of being eased up in the final 70 yards or so. I think the fillies that she's been beating are okay, not great, but she's doing what she has to do. I like Faiza. There's no doubt about it.
So Faiza's not headed to the Kentucky Oaks. We know Wet Paint that you mentioned looks like the favorite for the Kentucky Oaks at this point. She's rolled through the series at Oaklawn Park. And one of the fillies she dusted at Oaklawn came back last week and just rolled them in the Ashland Stakes at 20-1. So if you liked Wet Paint before, I think you like her even more after Defining Purpose was victorious in the Ashland.
Wonder Wheel, 5th up on the outside, 4 lengths off the lead. Then Guns and Graces, Pride of the Nile last. They come to the quarter pole. Defining Purpose tries to draw alongside of Effortlessly Elegant. Now Punch Bowl seeks running room, changing lanes toward the outside. Julia Shining is right there with her. Wonder Wheel is a wide 5th, 3 from the front. Defining Purpose has the lead. Into the final furlong, Central Bank Ashland. Julia Shining is contesting second with Punch Bowl. Defining Purpose in front by 2.5 lengths. Defining Purpose chased all the way to the line. Defining Purpose has pulled a 20-1 upset in the Central Bank Ashland for Brian Hernandez Jr.
20-1, that gets you out of your chair, but that's peanuts in the Ashland, Jeff. Since they went back to dirt, this race has seen 27-1, 35-1, 50-1 winners, and now a 20-1 winner. And they almost all have the same recipe, up near the front and upsetting horses who were well backed. And all the favorites have we seen so far throughout the course of this season on the 3-year-old filly trail. It seems like the favorites did show up in this particular one. Punch Bowl ran a good second in here. What a weekend for Brad Cox at Keeneland. He won 4 of the 8. He won some big races, but in the 2 big ones, he had 2 tough beat seconds with Verifying and then with Punch Bowl in here. I mean, he could have had a 6 for 8 weekend with a little bit of extra help and a lot more purse money in that case. I don't take a whole lot out of this race of the Ashland. When the Ashland's been won by upsetters, it typically does not play back in the Kentucky Oaks. Right. Wonder Wheel, the Julia Shining, Punch Bowl, all in this race. I've got cold feet going to the Oaks with them.
I do, especially since we like the other fillies so much better, Wet Paint. But I will say this, apart from the fact that you've gotten horses that are winning these big races that don't have good numbers, I don't remember the last time we've had 2 fillies who we thought were as good as they were, Wonder Wheel and then Hoosier Filly, completely go backwards. You see one of them, but both of them have just crashed and burned. And that's just really, that's horse racing, but it's more, I see a lot with 2-year-old fillies turning 3. Sometimes they're different. They don't mature, or they mature early and they don't grow up after that, or they go the other way. So I think that's what we're seeing here. On the other hand, Phasia, we talked about her. She looks like she is going the right way. So, and obviously the other filly, Wet Paint is. So to me, I think when the dust settles, unless something comes out of the woodwork, eventually those 2 horses are going to hook up, and then we're going to see who the best is. Right now, unfortunately, it's not going to happen in Kentucky in the Oaks.
Yeah, here's the road to the Kentucky Oaks. It's been a rocky one to this point. The Gazelle over the weekend we'd even talk about. Promiser America, 26-1 big upset, was even bigger than the Ashland upset. Of course, back in the Gulfstream Oaks, we saw Affirmative Lady come off of a maiden win, I believe it was, and step right up and win the Gulfstream Oaks. Fairgrounds Oaks, South Lawn upset all the big names there. Brad Cox has been able to hold serve with a couple favorites. Botanical's a really nice filly who won the Bourbonnette Oaks on Spiral Day or Jeff Ruby Day at Turfway on the synthetic, and then the favorite in the fantasy, Wet Paint, sweeping the series there at Oaklawn. Wet Paint looks super duper strong at this point. And of course, earlier we saw Devona Dale with Darth Vader at 46-1. The Suncoast upset when it was Wonder Wheel's return race against Julia Shining. That was a 38-1 upsetter. So the Oaks has been a little kooky this year. Maybe we've got either Wet Paint as a very solid favorite or anything goes in a Kentucky Oaks where we could see a Lemons Forever kind of result, with a 40-50-1 winner of the Kentucky Oaks. If you're trying to find the Kentucky Derby Oaks double at this point in time, we're trying to figure out the Derby, much less the Oaks side of it. Maybe it's Wet Paint and somebody in the Derby, but if it's not Wet Paint, the top has pulled off.
Botanical is good, but she's an all-weather horse. Doesn't mean she can't be a dirt horse, and she's bred to be one by Medallion d'Oro out of Mare by Blame. But that Turfway all-weather synthetic form doesn't always translate. And if it translates, then she's right there with all of them. But I don't know whether at this stage you can say that, other than you can, again, watch her work at Churchill and maybe you'll learn something. So that's the only other filly that I think, and South Lawn might be pretty good as well. Yep. But right now, I think I'll take Wet Paint. That's a pretty easy filly to like.
All right, Derby Oaks pictures. We've got them covered for you. Now the older runners. They were back in full force at Keeneland this weekend where it was salty and sweet. Good Night Olive. She was back in a big way in the Madison.
Good Night Olive has the lead. Mary, quite contrary, trying to chase her down with 1/8 of a mile to go, and Society is third back toward the inside. Good Night Olive, just over a 16th to go. Mary, quite contrary, still trying, still 2 lengths away. The champ in front. Goodnight Olive chased all the way by Mary Quite Contrary. Goodnight Olive to win the Grade 1 Madison for Iran Ortiz Jr. in a successful season's debut. 1 minute 23.12 seconds.
And just one of 2 Breeders' Cup champions to return this weekend successfully at Keeneland was Goodnight Olive in the Madison. We also saw Caravel, pictured here, beat the boys again in the Shakertown. She won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint over that course at Keeneland against the boys back in November. Not so much success for Wonder Wheel, who was 6th in the Ashland. A 4th Breeders' Cup champion is going to show up at Keeneland in a 6-day period, Jeff. You don't get that many places. Modern Games back this Friday in the Maker's Mark Mile. That race was drawn today. Can't wait to see Modern Games back in action. But, boy, when you talk Breeders' Cup champions, 4 of them back at Keeneland. 2 successful, Caravel. But I think Goodnight Olive's kind of, I know Modern Games still has yet to run, but Goodnight Olive's returned, the headliner there. I think she's won, 7 in a row now?
Yeah.
And what for her? I mean, do they even think of something like the Met Mile with her?
I don't think so. I think that they would probably try to stretch her out if they're going to stretch her out against fillies and mares. I mean, it depends. But there are some really good horses that I think will be showing up for that race. I don't think it's necessary for Goodnight Olive. When you win that many in a row, I mean, why not just keep winning? Try to win another 5 or 6 to finish out your career. And if they want to, if Chad Brown takes it conservatively, especially at Belmont, where he could actually stretch her out without having to worry about 2 turns, I think she'll probably run at Churchill and then go to New York. But I don't think she was quite at her best. I don't think Chad wanted her at her best in this race. Yeah. I thought maybe, set her out there. She's good enough to win. Don't squeeze her 2 drives the long year, Yeah. But the way she won that race, the daughter of Go Zapper and out of a mare by Smart Strike. I mean, whatever she does going 7/8, she got to think she could do it going a mile. So we'll see what happens with her. But good, it was a very, very strong field, and she handled it convincingly without, I don't think, being 100%.
Mary Quite Contrary is going to make some money. I mean, she was a really good one at Gulfstream this winter. Switched to Shug McGahee's barn first time with this one. But, boy, I could see her getting a hold of some races 7/8 of a mile when there's not Goodnight Olive in the field and be awfully, awfully tough. She looks like a good one, and she solidified her form. It looked like a regional form, like she was a really good Florida horse. How did she stack up against the best? She was coming at the end there. She was trying to get Goodnight Olive, and she was running away from Society and some other good horses in behind her. 4th topic this week on It's Official is looks just like him. You know the saying, a doppelganger, somebody who looks just like another. Well, Doppelganger, the horse, looks like his papa Into Mischief, and on Saturday, he finally ran like him. Doppelganger winning the Grade 1 Carter. You're going to have to wait to find him in this one. He's way in the back, number 7.
Top of the stretch. Little Vic is trying to shake loose. Today's Flavor is in for the fight. Repo Rocks, Expressman, Doppelganger, and also Bold Journey is back for more. Anyone's race in the Carter. Today's Flavor is very game to the inside. Repo Rocks in between horses. Here comes Doppelganger. It's still Today's Flavor. Doppelganger's trying to pull it off. Doppelganger on the grandstand side. Doppelganger, the longest shot on the field, wins the Carter. Doppelganger over Repo Rocks. Expressman was in there with Today's Flavor. Running time, 1 minute 23.25 seconds.
Now, Jeff, you got to see Doppelganger quite a bit on the West Coast now with Brittany Russell, one of those horses that was moved east from the Bob Baffert barn and has run well for Brittany Russell. Big win there in the Carter handicap. He's by Into Mischief. He's the doppelganger, Jeff, right? Because he looks just like Into Mischief. We've got the photos of the 2 of them there. Look at the blaze, almost identical there, and twinsies, if you will. But if he can run like Into Mischief, he's going to be on to something.
Well, he's now a Grade 1 winning son of Into Mischief. So that should make his connections happy. There's residual value there somewhere. I never thought he was a top colt, but he is undefeated now in 3 starts this year since being transferred to Brittany Russell's barn. He was also, when Bob Baffert had him, because he was supposed to be or hoped to be a Derby horse, he won his debut sprinting. Then it was 4th in the San Vicente behind Forbidden Kingdom. He was 4-5 that day, and then they routed him forever. And I don't think he's a 2-turn horse. He's a router. He can. He did win a 2-turn race at Laurel, but maybe most effective as a late running sprinter or a 1-turn miler type of horse. And now it's going to get tough because now he has to tackle the big boys. This was a Grade 1 race.
Yeah.
But, Repo Rocks, he's gotten good, but, Wide Burial was scratched. It wasn't that great of a field. So I mean, it's good to have that in the on the resume, but it's going to get tougher from now. And the buyer number of 93 isn't going to win too many grade ones. Trust me on that. So this might have been his day to shine, but it's in the bag. He's got that in the hip pocket, and it was a good win and one that I would never have predicted. But he was 17-1 in a 6-horse field, and they got there. So good for him.
And we're looking for our stars of tomorrow each week on this show. So our fifth and final topic will send us just below the surface of the stardom and looking for the next star. How about Ceiling Crusher in the Evening Jewel at Santa Anita? Maybe one to jump out of the Calbred ranks.
Ceiling Crusher is opening up with authority. A 5-length lead, and the lights are out. Ceiling Crusher dominating the Evening Jewel Stakes. She is going to win by the length of the stretch. Ceiling Crusher and Juan Hernandez dazzling home. Wins by about 13 lengths.
What do you make of this, Doug O'Neill trainee?
Well, she brought $22,000 in the Northern California auction as a yearling, where 50% of the horses bring 1,000. I mean, there's farms where I raise horses there and train there. Maybe they didn't think she was one of the better ones, but she looks like one of the better ones in the entire crop now. She'd won her first 2 starts. And she was then transferred to Doug O'Neill's barn. I assume she was bought privately after her debut win, which was very impressive last year as a 2-year-old. Really impressive. Something happened to her. She comes back off the layoff. She wins an allowance race, and then this happens. She earns a 94 buyer number, which makes her one of the fastest on numbers in the entire crop, even though she's just a Calbred beating Calbreds. And the way she won that race literally eased up in the final furlong. And being by Mr. Big, a son of Dynaformer who gets fillies that run long, and Doug O'Neill, he's not afraid to take a shot. He'll go anywhere and run a horse any place, anytime, no matter how overmatched it may look like. But this is one filly that I think he could go after the big girls in the division and not be overmatched. That's how good she is, and she's never routed. And the Mr. Bigs, whatever they do short, they do better long. I mean, this is a star of the future. It's just a matter of just how ambitious they want to get right now. She's
3-year-old filly, right?
Yeah, 3-year-old filly.
How about Black Eyed Susan? Doug likes to show up at the big races.
Listen, based on what I see,
I
would absolutely. And you know how possibility. My angle is first time around 2 turns is they're always going to be their best if they don't want to run it, but it's definitely going to be their best if they do, and I think she will. She's a good mover. She's a nice athlete and all that, and trains like a good filly. It's all there. And one of these days, maybe next time, we'll find out how good she is. But I'm following her, and wherever she goes, Ceiling Crusher is her name.
All right, those are our 5 topics this week. We got through them all. They're now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. Now time for a little fun, a little bonus topic here at the end. Jeff, we talked about Doppelganger earlier, right? That's somebody who looks like somebody else. Doppelganger, the horse, looked like his sire into Mischief. Right. I got this text message on Florida Derby Day from our buddy Brian Nadeau, right? Okay. Handicapper with Ron Nicoletti down there on the simulcast feed. He said, I saw Jeff Siegel today. And I thought to myself, you did not see Jeff Siegel at the Florida Derby, but maybe you did. Here's the deal. Brian sends me the video. Let's look here. Let's go right here. Is this the one? Yes. So he tells me that this guy on the NBC feed he thought was you. And I've got him marked. It's not Jeff Siegel. This is not Jeff Siegel. But my text message from Brian was, I said hi to Siegel today after race 13. He looked at me like I was from Saturn. And I said to myself, well, that's probably because it wasn't Jeff Siegel. So you have a doppelganger who's running around with the Forte gang. I don't know if you know that or not.
I don't, but I've had Danny DeVito thrown at me for a few times. Not recently. He's gotten older, but when he was younger, when he was on Taxi, maybe. But anyway, so I've heard that. But I've seen worse. I'll tell you that. I've seen worse.
I knew when you looked at him like he was from Saturn, I was like, that's not Siegel. He's the nicest guy in the world. If you saw him, he would have hugged you. He would have talked to you. So, Brian, we had a little fun at your expense. My wife and I have been making fun of the photos you've been sending us all week because we're like, that's Siegel. That's why
I decided not to take my private jet. That's why the
guy looked at you and did not talk to you because you thought he was somebody that he wasn't. So we'll have a little fun at Brian's expense. And Jeff's doppelganger is somebody who hangs out with the Forte crew. So maybe we'll see him at the Kentucky Derby. Maybe Brian will go say hi to him at Churchill.
Yeah, I'm going to fly to Florida. I'm life and death to drive 5 miles down the freeway to go to Santa Anita, but I'm going to fly to Florida. I don't think so. But anyway.
If you're going to get there, Florida
if I didn't see it, if that was really me and I didn't know it, then hello, Brian.
That's going to wrap things up this week on It's Official. We try to be serious. We try to have a little fun, and we'll do it all again in 7 days' time every Tuesday here. And between now and then, we'll have our First Call podcast on Friday where we preview weekend stakes. Big weekend at Keeneland, week 2 of the spring meet there. We've got a big day at Laurel with 2 win-in-your-ins for the Preakness and the Black-Eyed Susan stakes as part of Laurel stakes schedule on Saturday. So we'll look at some of those races. And, of course, we got action all around the country for you this weekend. Oaklawn's got the Apple Blossom, only 4 in the Apple Blossom, but Clairiere and Secret Oath renew their rivalry in that one, so I'm sure we'll talk about that race on Friday's program. On behalf of my partner, Jeff Siegel, the guy who looks like him at Gulfstream Park, and myself, Jeremy Plonk, we'll be back next week on It's Official.